The night of the inn's 100th birthday, my own daughter stood up in front of the whole town and told me to beg. She said it loud, with a glass in her hand and 200 people watching. Beg or get nothing. Those were her words. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she held every card in the room. What she did not know was that I had already played the only card that mattered, weeks before, in a quiet office on a rainy afternoon, with no one watching at all. My name is Eleanor Hale. I am 60 years old, and this is the story of how I lost my daughter and finally understood the difference between holding on and being held hostage. It happened at the Gable Inn, the place my grandfather built with his hands the year the harbor froze solid and the fishing boats sat trapped in the ice for a month. He laid the foundation stones himself. He named it for our family, the Gables, and he hung a ring of brass keys on a hook beside the front desk, one key for every room, and a single heavier key for the front door that he called the master. He told my father that as long as a Gable held those keys, no one in Quill Harbor would ever be turned away on a cold night. My father told me the same thing the morning he handed them to me. And I had worn them on a braided leather cord around my neck for almost 40 years. That night I was wearing the deep green dress I had bought for the occasion, plain and well cut, the kind of dress a woman wears when she wants to be present without being loud. I had pinned my hair back. I had spent 3 days getting the dining room ready, polishing the long oak table where 4 generations of guests had eaten breakfast, setting out the good glasses, asking Sully to string the little lights along the porch the way we used to do for the new year. It was supposed to be a celebration. 100 years. 100 years of strangers becoming friends, of fishermen sheltering from storms, of honeymooners and widowers and traveling salesmen all sleeping under the same roof my grandfather raised. I should have known something was wrong when Hannah arrived in a car I did not recognize, a long silver thing that did not belong on our gravel drive, with Preston beside her in a suit that cost more than the inn made in a good month. I should have known when she did not come and find me, when she went straight to the small platform Sully had set up for the toasts, when she tapped a spoon against her glass and the room went quiet and she smiled at me the way a person smiles when they are about to do something they have already decided to do. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand what she said, and to understand what I said back, the reply she did not expect, you have to know how we got there. You have to know who Hannah used to be, and who I used to be, and what a man named Preston Vance wanted from a piece of land that had never been for sale. Have you ever watched someone you raised turn into a person you do not recognize? If you have, write yes in the comments. I want to know I am not the only one. Let me take you back. Walter died 14 years ago, on an ordinary Tuesday in October, with no warning at all. His heart simply stopped while he was carrying firewood up from the cellar. I found him at the bottom of the stairs with the logs scattered around him, and the strange thing I remember is that the kettle was still whistling on the stove, going on about its small business as if the world had not just ended. We had been married 30 years. He was not a Gable by blood, but he loved the inn the way I loved it, maybe more, because he had chosen it and I had only inherited it. He learned to fix the boiler that always broke in January. He learned the name of every regular guest and the names of their children. He used to sit at the front desk in the evenings with the old guest register open, reading the entries from decades past out loud to me, laughing at the handwriting of people long dead. When he died, Hannah was 19. She came home from college for the funeral and she did not go back for a long time. She stayed and she helped me, and those were the years I think of now when I want to remember the daughter I had. She was good then. She would get up before dawn to help me serve breakfast. She learned to strip the beds and turn the rooms. She sat with me on the porch in the evenings the way her father used to, and she let me cry when the crying came, which in those first years was often and without warning. There is a moment I keep. It was maybe a year after Walter passed. A storm came through, the kind we get in late autumn, and the power went out across the whole town. The inn was full. We lit every lamp and candle we owned, and the guests came down to the dining room because no one wanted to sit alone in the dark, and Hannah made cocoa on the gas stove and we told stories until the small hours. A man who had lost his wife that summer cried at the table, and Hannah put her hand over his hand the way she had seen me do, and she said, "You are not alone tonight," and she meant it. I looked at her across that candlelit room and I thought, she has it. Whatever it is that makes this place what it is, she has it. She will carry the keys one day, and they will be safe with her. I was wrong, but not in the way you might think. It was not that she never had it. It was that someone taught her to trade it away. You have to understand what the inn was to that town, not just to me. Quill Harbor is a small place. The kind of place where the woman at the post office knows your mother's maiden name, and the man who pumps the gas remembers the year your roof leaked. The inn sat at the heart of it the way a hearth sits at the heart of a house. When the fishing fleet came in late and frightened during a squall, the wives waited on our porch with my coffee in their hands. When a family burned out of their home one February, they slept in our rooms for 6 weeks and never saw a bill. My grandfather had written it into the way the place ran, this idea that a roof is a kind of promise, and the promise does not check your bank account at the door. 2 people in this story knew that as well as I did, and I want you to meet them now, because they stood by me when my own blood did not. The first is Ruth Mercer, who has been my closest friend since we were girls in pigtails throwing stones off the breakwater. Ruth runs the little bookshop on the square, the one with the bell over the door and the cat in the window, and she has buried a husband too, so she knows the particular silence of a house at night when the person you loved is no longer in it. The second is Sully. Sullivan, his name is, though no one has called him that since the first Bush was president. Sully came to the inn as a young man to fix a porch step and stayed 45 years. He is part of the building now, the way the salt and the old beams are part of it. He has fixed that boiler more times than either of us can count, cursing it in a voice that carries across the harbor, and he has never once asked for more than I could pay. Those 2 raised Hannah alongside me, in the loose way a town raises a child. Ruth taught her to read in the back of the bookshop. Sully taught her to drive a nail straight and to bait a hook without flinching. When her father died, it was Sully who carried the casket and Ruth who held me up at the graveside, and Hannah, 19 and white as paper, stood between them with my hand crushed in hers. That is the girl she was. A girl the whole town had a hand in making, and the whole town loved. I tell you this so that when she changes, you will feel it the way I felt it. Because the cruelest thing is not a daughter who was always cold. The cruelest thing is a daughter who was warm, and who let someone reach into her and turn the warmth down a little at a time, so slowly that by the time you notice the cold, you cannot remember the day it started. Hannah went back to school eventually and finished her degree. She studied business. She came home with new words in her mouth, words like margin and occupancy rate and asset. She was not wrong to learn them. The inn always struggled. 100-year-old building on the water is a hungry thing, always needing a new roof, new wiring, new paint against the salt. There were winters I did not pay myself so I could pay Sully and keep the heat on. Hannah wanted to help me make it stable, and at first I was grateful. She set up a proper accounting system. She showed me how the numbers really looked. We argued sometimes, but they were good arguments, the kind between 2 people who want the same thing and disagree about the road. Then she met Preston. He came to Quill Harbor the way men like him come to small towns, which is to say he came to take something and called it bringing something. He was handsome in a way that made you trust him for about a week. He ran a development company out of the city, and his company had its eye on our stretch of coast. Quill Harbor sits on the last long curve of undeveloped shoreline in the whole county. There is a reason for that. My grandfather and 3 other families had spent their lives making sure of it. But land like that, to a man like Preston, is not a place. It is a number with too many zeros being wasted on seagulls and old people. He met Hannah at a Chamber of Commerce dinner. Within a year they were married, in a ceremony I paid for, on the lawn of the inn, with the harbor behind them and the lights strung along the porch. I gave a toast. I welcomed him to the family. I meant it. Lord forgive me, I meant it. The first time I understood what he really was, we were sitting on that same porch, the 3 of us, the summer after the wedding. Hannah was pregnant with Lily then, just beginning to show. Preston was looking out at the water with a glass of my late husband's good whiskey in his hand, and he said, almost to himself, you know what a property like this is worth, Eleanor? And I said, it is worth everything to me, and he laughed and said, no, I mean the real number, and he said a figure out loud that I will not repeat, and Hannah did not stop him. She looked at the water too, with the same expression, and that was the first night I lay awake afraid of my own daughter. There were other nights after that, small ones, each one easy to dismiss on its own. I noticed that Hannah stopped telling the guests the story of the harbor freezing, the way she used to, and started telling them instead about the renovations they were planning, the improvements, the modern touches. I noticed that when an old regular came back, a retired schoolteacher who had honeymooned with us in 1970 and returned every anniversary since, even after her husband passed, Hannah was polite to her but distant, and later said to me, "Lo, in the kitchen, Mom, she pays the off-season rate, she barely covers the cost of the room, we cannot keep doing this." As if a woman who had spent 50 years of anniversaries under our roof was a line in a ledger that did not add up. And I noticed the way Preston spoke about Sully. There was an evening Sully had stayed late to patch a leak over room 4, soaked to the skin, refusing to go home until it was right, and Preston watched him through the window and said, "You know you could replace that whole approach with a maintenance contract for half what you pay that old man." And I said, "Sully is not an expense, he is family," and Preston smiled and said, "That is exactly the kind of thinking that is sinking this place, Eleanor. You cannot run a business on family." Hannah was in the room. She did not say a word. The silence of the people who say nothing while you are insulted is its own answer, and I heard it. As I tell you this, I wonder where you are. Maybe a kitchen, maybe a bus, maybe lying awake the way I was. Write the name of your town in the comments. It helps me to know you are out there. Lily was born in the spring. For a while, the baby softened everything. Preston had a development to chase 2 counties over and was gone for months at a time, and Hannah brought the baby to the inn most days, and I held my granddaughter on the same porch where I had held Hannah, and I let myself believe the fear had been foolishness, a widow's nerves. Then I got sick. It was 2 winters ago. The boiler had failed again, and I spent 3 days and a half cold and trying to keep the pipes from bursting, and I caught a chill that turned into pneumonia. I did not tell anyone how bad it was. That was my mistake, one of several. By the time Ruth came by and found me, I had a fever that frightened the doctor, and on the worst night, getting up to find water, I fell on the back stairs and cracked 2 ribs. I do not remember most of that week. I remember Hannah's face above me in the hospital, and I remember being grateful, so grateful, that my daughter was there. And I remember Preston, sitting by the bed with a folder of papers, his voice gentle and reasonable, saying, "Eleanor, you gave us all a scare, and we just want to make sure that if something like this happens again, someone can take care of things for you. The inn, the accounts, the bills. You should not have to worry about any of it while you heal." And Hannah holding my hand and saying, "Mom, it is just a precaution. Just in case." I signed what they put in front of me. I was 60 years old, I had 3 cracked ribs and a fever that had only just broken, and my daughter was holding my hand and telling me it was just in case. I signed a durable power of attorney that gave Hannah the authority to act for me. I signed papers adding her name to the inn's bank accounts. I did not read them the way Walter would have made me read them. I trusted the hand that was holding mine. Sully was the first one to feel the change, before I would let myself feel it. He came to me one morning a few weeks after I was home, turning his cap in his hands the way he does when something is bothering him, and he said, "Eleanor, the girl told me I cannot order parts anymore without running it past her first." He did not say it as a complaint. He said it as a question, the question being, is this you, or is this her? And I told him, give it time, she is only trying to help while I get my strength back. He looked at me for a long moment, and Sully has known me 45 years, and he said, "All right, but you tell me the day it stops being help, and I will be standing right here." Then he put his cap back on and went to fix something, because that is how Sully says he loves you. He did not believe me. He was right not to. That is how it begins, you know. Not with a knife. With a folder, and a kind voice, and the word precaution. I got better. I came home. And the inn I came home to was not quite mine anymore, though it took me months to feel the edges of it. Hannah had reorganized the accounts. She paid the bills now, she said, so I would not have to. When I asked about a deposit from a wedding party we had hosted, she told me not to worry, she was handling it. When Sully needed money for lumber to repair the dock, he came to me, and I told him to go ahead, and 3 days later Hannah called me, her voice tight, asking why I had authorized an expense without checking with her first. It was my dock. It was my inn. And my daughter was asking me why I had spent money on it. The keys still hung around my neck. I want you to remember that. Through all of it, the keys never left me. Preston could control the accounts through Hannah, and Hannah could control me through love and worry and a piece of paper I had signed in a hospital bed. But the keys, the actual brass keys, the deed, the legal ownership of the Gable Inn, those were still mine. My grandfather had built that protection into the bones of the place, and my father had reinforced it, and Walter and I had never undone it. The inn was mine, free and clear, to do with as I saw fit while I lived. The power of attorney let Hannah manage things. It did not let her sell the one thing she had begun to want. That distinction is the whole story. Hold on to it. It was about 8 months ago that Preston made his real move. He came to the inn on a Sunday afternoon, both of them, and they brought Lily, which I should have recognized as a tactic. They sat in the front parlor, the good room, with the photographs of my grandparents on the wall, and Preston spread out a set of glossy drawings on the coffee table. "Eleanor," he said, "I want to show you something we have been dreaming about." The drawings were of the inn. Except it was not the inn. It was a building where the inn had been, a long low thing of glass and pale wood, with the word Meridian across the front in thin modern letters. "Meridian Shores," he said. "A boutique resort and residences. 40 units. A spa. A restaurant with a chef he had already been talking to." He talked for 20 minutes. He used the word legacy 4 times. He said the Gable name would be on a plaque in the lobby, honored forever, and that I would never have to scrub another toilet or worry about another boiler as long as I lived. He said I would be a partner. He said the numbers, the real numbers, and Hannah watched my face the way a person watches a pot they are waiting to boil. When he finished, I asked one question. I asked, "Where is the inn in this drawing?" Preston smiled. "The inn," he said, "is the past, Eleanor. Meridian Shores is the future. We honor the past by building on it." I looked at the picture of the glass building standing where my grandfather had laid his foundation stones in the year the harbor froze. And I said, "No." Just that. No. The temperature in the room changed. Hannah leaned forward and started to talk, fast, about how I was not being realistic, about how the inn was bleeding money, about how I was getting older and could not keep doing this alone, about how this was a chance to take care of all of us, about Lily's future, about her college, about how I was being given a gift and could not even see it. And I sat and listened to my daughter recite a speech that I knew, the way you know your own child's voice on a telephone before they say their name, had been written by the man sitting next to her. Lily was on the floor by my feet, playing with the brass keys around my neck, the way she liked to do, turning them over in her small hands and asking what each one opened. And I put my hand over hers, over the keys, and I said, "The inn is not for sale, and it never will be, and I would like you all to stay for supper." They did not stay for supper. Have you ever had someone tell you that giving up everything you love is a gift? How did you answer them? Tell me in the comments. I have a feeling some of you know exactly what I mean. After they left, I sat in the parlor for a long time as the light went out of the room. Then I did something I had not done in years. I went to the front desk and I took down the old guest register, the leather one from the year Walter and I were married, and I opened it, because that was where Walter used to sit when he needed to think, and I needed to think the way he would have. That is when I found the letter. It was tucked into the back cover, behind the marbled end paper, where the leather had come loose. I do not know how long it had been there. It was in Walter's hand, on a single folded sheet, and it was dated 3 months before he died, which means he wrote it knowing nothing, expecting to carry firewood up those stairs for another 20 years. It was not a warning. It was not about Hannah or Preston, who did not exist to him yet. It was just a love letter, the kind a man writes and hides and forgets he wrote. Ellie, it began, because he was the only one who ever called me that. I am sitting at the desk and you are upstairs singing to yourself and you do not know I can hear you, and I am thinking that I have been the luckiest man who ever lived. I married a woman who came with 100 years of other people's history hanging around her neck, and instead of letting it crush her she carries it like it weighs nothing. I want to tell you something in case I forget to say it out loud. The inn is not the keys, and it is not the building, and it is not even the land. The inn is the way you treat a stranger who comes in cold. Everything else is just the box it comes in. If a day ever comes when keeping the box would mean losing the thing inside it, let the box go. Keep the thing inside. That is you, Ellie. The thing inside is you. I love you in this life and I will look for you in the next. Walter. I read it 11 times. I sat at his desk where he used to sit, with his words in my hands 14 years after his heart stopped on the cellar stairs, and for the first time since the funeral I did not feel alone in the room. He had told me what to do, you see. He had told me long before I needed to hear it. Keep the thing inside. Let the box go if you have to. I did not understand yet how I would do it. But I understood that night that I was no longer trying to win anything from Hannah and Preston. I was trying to protect the thing inside the box, which was not the building and not even me. It was 100 years of not turning anyone away on a cold night. And if I had to give up owning it to keep it safe, then that is what I would do. Walter had given me permission. Maybe he had given me the idea. I folded the letter and put it in the pocket of my cardigan, over my heart, where it stayed for weeks. The next morning I called Adele Crane. Adele had been the family's lawyer for 30 years, since old Mr. Penn retired and handed her his files. She was near 70 now, sharp as a fishhook, with a voice roughened by the cigarettes she swore she had quit. She had drawn up Walter's affairs after he died and she knew the inn's papers better than I did. I asked her to come to the inn rather than meet at her office, because I did not want anyone in town to see my car outside a lawyer's door and start the gossip wheel turning. She arrived with a leather satchel and a thermos of coffee that smelled like it could stir paint. We sat at the kitchen table, the one Walter had built, and I told her everything. The hospital. The papers I had signed. The drawings of the glass building. The way the accounts had slipped out of my hands. The word precaution. Adele listened without saying anything, which is a thing good lawyers and good friends both know how to do. When I finished she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Eleanor, I am going to ask you some hard questions, and I need you to not get angry at me for asking them. Ask, I said. Has Hannah said anything to you, or has Preston, about your memory? About your judgment? Have they suggested you see a doctor? Have they used words like confused, or tired, or overwhelmed, in front of other people? I felt a coldness move through me, because the answer was yes. Hannah had started saying, in front of Sully, in front of Ruth, in front of guests, things like, Mom forgets things, or, Mom gets confused with the numbers, or, we worry about her out here all alone. Small things. Affectionate things, almost. Said with a sad little smile. Yes, I said. Why? Adele set down her terrible coffee. Because, she said, the power of attorney you signed lets her manage your affairs. It does not let her sell the inn, because you still own it and you are still legally competent. The only way they take this place is if they can show a court you are not competent to make your own decisions. If they can get a doctor to say you have dementia, or that you cannot be trusted with your own money, they can petition for guardianship. And if they get guardianship, Eleanor, then Hannah does not need your signature. She becomes your signature. I have seen this, she went on, and her voice was tired in a way that frightened me more than anger would have. I have seen it more times than I want to count. It is the quiet ones who do it. They do not yell. They build a file. A little story here, a little story there, until one day a judge looks at the story and not at the woman, and the woman loses everything while everyone tells her it is for her own good. I am not confused, I said, and I heard my own voice and it sounded thin, and I hated that. I know you are not, Adele said. So we are going to prove it, and we are going to do something else, something they will never see coming. Eleanor, do you trust me? I trusted her. I had buried a husband with her sitting beside me. I trusted her. Then here is what we are going to do, she said. And she told me. And I am not going to tell you yet, because if I tell you now you will not feel what the town felt that night at the gala, and I want you to feel it. But I will tell you the first thing we did, because it cost me nothing and it changed everything. The next day I drove 3 towns over to a doctor who had never met me, a specialist in memory and aging, and I paid out of my own pocket, with cash from a tin I had kept since before Hannah ever touched the accounts, for a full examination. Physical. Cognitive. The whole battery of tests they give to find the cracks in an old mind. It took most of a day. And at the end the doctor, a kind young woman with steady eyes, told me what I already knew. Mrs. Hale, she said, you are sharper than I am. There is nothing wrong with your mind at all. I asked her to put it in writing, signed and dated and stamped. She did. I drove home with that paper on the seat beside me like a passenger, and I understood that I had just disarmed the most dangerous weapon they had, and that they did not even know they had lost it. Has anyone ever made you doubt your own mind? Made you wonder if maybe they were right and you were the problem? Tell me how it felt. Tell me how you found your way back. The evening after I came home from that doctor with my mind in writing, I went to see Ruth. I needed to say the thing out loud to someone who was not a lawyer, because Adele dealt in what could be proven, and I needed to talk to someone who dealt in what could be borne. We sat in the back of her bookshop after she had turned the sign to closed, the cat asleep on a stack of returns, 2 cups of tea going cold between us, and I told her everything I had been carrying alone. Ruth let me finish. Then she said, Ellie, I am going to tell you something and I need you to hear it as love and not as cruelty. You have been making excuses for that girl since the day she could walk. You called it patience. The rest of us called it something else. Hannah is not a child being led astray. She is a grown woman who is choosing, every single day, to stand next to a man while he tries to take her home, and to say nothing. The man is the snake. But she opened the door and let him in, and she keeps the door open. You can love her and still see that. In fact, you have to see it, or you will lose everything trying not to. I started to defend her, the way I always did, and Ruth put her hand flat on the table, gentle but final, and said, No. Not tonight. Tonight you are going to let yourself know what you know. And I sat in that little shop that smelled of old paper and dust and 40 years of friendship, and I let myself know it. My daughter, the girl Ruth had taught to read in this very room, was helping someone try to destroy me. Knowing it did not stop me loving her. That is the part no one tells you. The love does not switch off because the person becomes dangerous. It just learns to stand in the same room as the danger, and that is the loneliest a heart can be. When I left, Ruth held the door and said, Whatever you decide to do, and I can see you have decided something, you do it knowing this old woman is behind you to the last. Then she said the thing I needed most. She said, Walter would have done the same. I drove home in the dark a little less alone. Now I have to tell you about the dinner, because the dinner is when I learned exactly how far they were willing to go. About a month after the doctor, Hannah called me, and her voice was the warm voice, the daughter voice, the one I had not heard in so long that hearing it made my chest hurt. Mom, she said, I have been awful, I know I have. Preston pushes so hard and I get caught up in it and I forget that this is your home and your life. Can we start over? Can I bring Lily out, just us, and cook you dinner for once instead of the other way around? Let me take care of you for an evening. I knew. Part of me knew the whole time. But she was my daughter, and she was offering me the thing I wanted most in the world, which was simply to have her back, and so I did what mothers do. I said yes, and I let myself hope. They came on a Friday. Hannah brought groceries and shooed me out of my own kitchen and cooked, badly and sweetly, the way she had cooked as a teenager, and Lily set the table and got the forks on the wrong side and was so proud of herself that I nearly cried. Preston was charming and quiet and deferential. He complimented the inn. He asked me to tell Lily the story of the year the harbor froze, and I told it, and Lily listened with her mouth open, and for an hour, maybe two, we were a family. After dinner Lily fell asleep on the parlor sofa, and Hannah covered her with the quilt my mother had made, and the three of us sat with coffee, and Preston said he needed to step out and make a call about a project. He was gone a long time. I did not think much of it. The inn is large and a man on a phone wanders. But when I got up to refill the coffee, I went the long way, through the back hall, because I wanted to check that Lily had not kicked off her quilt. And as I passed the door to the small office behind the front desk, the office that holds the safe and the deed and the old records, I saw light under the door, and I heard the small click of a phone camera taking a picture. I opened the door. Preston was standing at the open file drawer, my files, my grandfather's files, with his phone held up, photographing the deed to the inn. He did not jump. That is the thing I remember. A guilty man jumps. Preston simply lowered the phone and smiled at me, the handsome trustworthy week-long smile, and said, "Eleanor, I hope you do not mind, I was just trying to understand the property structure so I can help Hannah help you. The boundaries are confusing. I wanted to get it right." "Get out of that drawer," I said. "Of course," he said, and he slid it shut, slow, unbothered. He walked past me close, and at the door he stopped and said, "Lo, just for me, you know, the trouble with people who live in the past is that they never see the future coming until it is already on top of them." And then he smiled again and went to find his wife. I stood in that office and my hands were shaking, not with fear, with something hotter than fear. Because I understood now. They were not photographing the deed to help anyone. They were building the file Adele had warned me about, and they were measuring the property, and they were waiting for the day they could take it. The dinner had not been a reconciliation. It had been a survey. My daughter had cooked me dinner so her husband could photograph the deed to my home while my granddaughter slept under my mother's quilt. After they left I called Adele, late as it was. I told her what I had seen. She was quiet, then she said one word. "Good." "Good," I said. "How is any of this good?" "Because," she said, "they have just told us their timeline. They are gathering documents, which means they are getting ready to file something. Which means we need to move first. Eleanor, are you ready to do the thing we talked about? Once you do it, you cannot undo it. That is the whole point. But it is final." She told me one more thing on that call, and it was the thing that took the last of my hesitation away. Adele had a friend, an old colleague at the county courthouse, the kind of friend who tells you what the public record will say a few days before it says it. And that friend had heard that a petition was being prepared. Not filed yet. Prepared. A petition for the guardianship of an aging woman, on the grounds of diminished capacity and inability to manage her own affairs, supported, the petition would say, by the concerns of her loving family and by the opinion of a physician who would be willing to examine her. They had not found their doctor yet. That was the only thing standing between me and a courtroom where my own daughter would hold the pen. They were shopping for a doctor who would look at a healthy 60-year-old woman and write the word confused, the way you shop for a contractor who will tell you the price you want to hear. When Adele said that, something in me went very quiet and very cold and very clear. They were not going to wait for me to slip. They were going to manufacture the slip. And the only way to win a game like that is to refuse to play it on the board they have built. You do not fight for the asset. You remove the asset from the world, so that winning the fight wins them nothing. I understood, finally, all the way down, what Walter had meant. Let the box go. I thought about Walter's letter, folded in my cardigan pocket. Keep the thing inside. Let the box go. I am ready, I said. I want to be honest with you about something, because I think some of you need to hear it. I did not feel strong when I said that. I felt sick. I was about to do something that would change my relationship with my only living child forever, and I knew it, and there was a coward in me that wanted to just sign Preston's papers and be done, to buy a few years of a daughter's warmth even if it was a lie. The hardest thing I ever did was not the thing I did at the gala. The hardest thing was driving to Adele's office the next week, in the rain, with my hands cold on the wheel, knowing that love sometimes asks you to do the thing that will make the person you love hate you. If you have ever loved someone enough to let them be angry at you, you understand. And if you do not understand yet, I am sorry, because it means you have not been tested that way, and one day you might be. Before I tell you what I signed in Adele's office, I have to tell you about the lunch, because the lunch is when Hannah took off the last of the mask, and I needed to see her face without it, one last time, before the end. She called me, after the dinner, and asked me to lunch, just the two of us, at the new place on the water, the one with the white tablecloths that had opened where the old hardware store used to be. I knew it was not really lunch. But I went, because I am a mother, and because some foolish part of me still wanted to give her a chance to be the girl who made cocoa in the dark. She looked beautiful. She had her father's eyes, which is a cruel thing for a face to have when the face is about to hurt you. We ordered. We talked about Lily for a while, safely, and then Hannah set down her fork and folded her hands and said, "Mom, I want to talk to you woman to woman." "I am listening," I said. She said, "You are 60 years old." She said it gently, the way you set down something breakable. "You have spent your whole life in that drafty building scrubbing other people's sheets. Dad is gone. You are alone out there. And I lie awake worrying that you are going to fall again, and next time there will be no one to find you, and you will die at the bottom of those stairs just like Dad did." That was a cruel thing to say, and she said it softly, which made it crueler. "I am not asking you to give up," she went on. "I am asking you to let me give you something. A real life. An apartment in town, near me, near Lily, somewhere warm with no stairs and no boiler and no strangers tracking sand through your front hall at midnight. Let Preston build the resort. You will be a partner. You will have more money than you have ever had. You will get to be Lily's grandmother instead of a tired old innkeeper who falls asleep at the desk. Do you not want that? Do you not want to enjoy the years you have left? Before we find out what happened next in the story, I want to take a brief moment to speak directly to anyone watching who might be going through their own sudden, overwhelming transition. If you are navigating a bitter divorce, the loss of a spouse, or a financial shock, you know the hardest part isn't just the money, it's not knowing what to do first. That is exactly why we created the Phoenix Blueprint. It is a practical, step-by-step guide for starting over. It doesn't have fluffy affirmations or vision boards. It is a tactical survival manual. It gives you the exact checklist for the first 48 hours, including the one rule you must follow: do not make any decision you cannot reverse. It includes the Found Money worksheet, showing you exactly how to check state databases, because 1 in 7 Americans actually has unclaimed money waiting for them right now. It even gives you word-for-word boundary scripts to use when family members pressure you for money or try to make decisions for you. You can get the entire guide right now for just $17. If you're watching on your TV, just pull out your phone, open your camera, and scan the QR code on the screen right now. If you're on a computer or phone, click the top link in the description. You don't have to figure this out alone. Now, let's get back to the story. The years you have left. There it was. The thing they always say, the people who want what you have. They tell you that you do not have long, so you might as well hand it over now. Whose idea was this lunch? I asked her. Yours or his? Something flickered in her face. Mine, she said, too fast. Mom, this is me. Preston is not even here. This is me asking you, as your daughter, please. And who would have the keys? I said. What? The keys, I said. To the inn. If I move to my warm little apartment with no stairs. Who holds the keys while I am gone? She looked at me, and I watched her decide to lie, and I watched her decide it was not worth it. We would hold them, she said. For the transition. Obviously someone has to manage the property during construction. Construction, I said. So it is decided. The resort. The income's down. Mom, she said, and now the gentleness was gone, now there was an edge in it, the edge I had heard Preston use. You are being impossible. You are clinging to a pile of rotten wood out of stubbornness and calling it loyalty. That building is going to fall down around your ears one day whether you let go of it or not, and when it does, you will have nothing, and I will have nothing, and Lily will have nothing, all because you could not bear to admit that the world moved on without you. Dad is dead, Mom. The inn is dead. You just have not buried it yet. I sat very still. I have found that when someone is trying to make you smaller, stillness is its own kind of answer. You sound just like him, I said. That was the wrong thing to say, or maybe the right thing. Her face closed like a door. Fine, she said, and she stood, and she put money on the table the way you throw something. Be alone out there, then. Be right and be alone. But do not call me crying when it all falls apart. And do not expect me to let Lily grow up thinking her grandmother chose a building over her. She left. I sat at the table with the white cloth for a long time, and the waiter, a kind boy, came and asked if I was all right, and I told him I was fine, and I was not, and I paid for both lunches because that is the kind of fool a mother is. That night I made my decision final. Not in anger. In sorrow, which lasts longer. A week later I drove to Adele's office in the rain, and I did the thing I had been afraid of. I am going to tell you now, because you have earned it. I did not write a new will. A will only matters after you are dead, and Hannah and Preston were not going to wait for me to die. They were going to take the inn while I was alive, by having me declared unfit, and then sell it out from under me. A will would not stop that. So Adele and I did something a will could never do. We gave the inn away. Not to Hannah. Not to Preston. Not to anyone who could ever sell it. We placed the gable inn, the building and the land and the whole irreplaceable stretch of waterfront it sits on, into an irrevocable preservation trust, held jointly by the Quill Harbor Heritage Trust and a coastal conservancy that exists for exactly this purpose, to keep wild shore wild and old places old. We sold the development rights to the conservancy for $1, which means that legally, forever, no one can ever build anything new on that land. No resort. No condominiums. No Meridian shores. Not by Preston, not by me, not by anyone, not in 100 years. The trust is irrevocable. That word means it cannot be undone, not by me, not by a court, not by any judge Preston could ever find. I gave up the power to undo it on purpose, because a power you cannot give away is a power someone can take from you. I kept one thing. I kept a life tenancy, which is a fancy way of saying that for as long as I live, I have the right to live in the inn and run it exactly as my family always has. The keys stay around my neck until the day I die. And the trust agreement names a steward to inherit the role of innkeeper when I am gone, someone who must prove, over 10 years, that they will run it as an inn and not as anything else, that they understand what the thing inside the box is. I left a door open, narrow but real, for that steward to be Hannah, or Lily, if they ever became the kind of person who deserved to walk through it. But here is the heart of it, the part that mattered that night at the gala. Once I signed those papers, I no longer fully owned the inn. The conservancy held the development rights. The trust held the land. There was nothing left for anyone to sell. There was nothing left to take. A guardianship would have been worthless, because even if a court had declared me a confused old woman the very next day, even if Hannah had become my legal guardian and held my pen in her own hand, there was no longer anything she could sell, because the asset was gone. I had not hidden it. I had not locked it away. I had given it to the future, where no one could ever reach it again. Adele watched me sign the last page. When I set down the pen she said, "Eleanor, do you understand what you just did? You just gave away $3 million of property to make sure no one could ever profit from it. Including you. Including your own daughter." "I understand," I said. She nodded, slow. Walter would be proud, she said. And then this woman who never showed anything, this lawyer who had sat dry-eyed through 100 family wars, took off her glasses and wiped her eyes, and said, I am proud, and I do not say that to clients. I told no one. Not Ruth, not Sully, not Lily, certainly not Hannah. I drove home in the rain with the radio off and the keys around my neck, and they felt different. Lighter. Not because they had lost their weight but because they had lost their danger. They were just keys again, the way my grandfather meant them. Keys to open doors for strangers on cold nights. Nothing anyone would kill a family over. The weeks after were the strangest of my life. I was carrying the biggest secret I had ever held, and I had to carry it while smiling at the very people I was protecting myself from. Hannah called more in those weeks, friendly, fishing, and I had to keep my voice easy and my hands steady. Preston came by once with a tape measure and a man he called a consultant, and I let them walk the grounds, because a woman who has nothing to hide lets people walk the grounds, and the whole time I knew that the land under their expensive shoes already belonged to a trust that would outlive all of us. I served them iced tea on the porch. It was the most peaceful I had felt in 2 years, watching a man measure a thing he could never have. The only ones I almost told were Sully and Lily. Sully, because he had earned it 45 years over, and I hated that he was worrying. But I knew that if I told him, his face would give it away, because Sully cannot lie to save his life, and I needed the secret to land on its own night. So I just told him, the day is coming when this will all make sense, and you will not have to worry anymore, and I need you to trust me a little longer. And he looked at me a long while and said, I have trusted you 45 years, Eleanor, I expect I can manage a few more weeks. And Lily, I almost told because she asked me, one evening on the porch, turning the keys over in her small hands the way she always did, Grandma, will these be mine someday? And I had to swallow hard before I could answer, because the honest answer was that I had just spent my whole inheritance making sure they would never belong to anyone in the way she meant, and that this was the greatest gift I could give her, though she was far too young to understand it. So I just said, these keys belong to whoever opens the door for people who are cold, and someday that might be you, if you are the kind of person who does that. And she said, very seriously, I am, and I believed her. Have you ever had to carry a secret to protect the people who would hate you for keeping it? It is a heavy thing. But there are kinds of love that can only be done in silence, and then revealed all at once, when the silence has done its work. And then I waited, because I knew Preston would have to make his move, and I wanted to see what it would be. It was the gala. The 100th birthday of the inn had been on the calendar for a year. The whole town was invited. I had planned it as a celebration, before any of this, and I had refused to cancel it, because canceling it would have told Preston that he had won something. So I let it go forward, and I suspect that is exactly what they were counting on, because what better stage could a man like Preston ask for than the entire town of Quill Harbor gathered in one room, with the press from the county paper there, and the mayor, and every old family on the coast. I did not know what they were planning. I only knew they were planning something, because Hannah had called the week before, friendly again, asking how many people were coming, asking if there would be a microphone, asking if she and Preston could say a few words, since after all the inn meant so much to the family. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I wanted to see it. Sully strung the lights along the porch. Ruth came early and helped me arrange the flowers. The dining room filled up with people I had known my whole life, fishermen and teachers and the woman who ran the post office and the children of guests who had honeymooned at the inn 40 years before. The county paper sent a young reporter with a camera. The string of little lights glowed. It was, for an hour, the most beautiful night the old inn had seen in years. Then Hannah tapped her spoon against her glass, and the room went quiet, and she stepped up onto Sully's little platform with Preston beside her, and Lily in a party dress between them, and she began to speak. She thanked everyone for coming. She talked about her grandfather, my grandfather, and the year the harbor froze, and she told the story almost right, almost the way I had told it to Lily at that dinner that turned out to be a survey. People smiled. Some had tears in their eyes. And then she said, but tonight is not just about the past. Tonight is about the future. And Preston stepped forward, and a young man I did not know unrolled a large board onto an easel that I had not noticed was there, and on the board was the drawing. The glass building. Meridian Shores. Standing where the inn stood. Across the top, in those thin modern letters, were the words "A new chapter for Quill Harbor." The room made a sound. Not a happy one. A confused murmur, people turning to each other, people turning to look at me. Preston talked. He was good at it, I will give him that. He talked about jobs and tax revenue and putting Quill Harbor on the map. He talked about honoring the Gable legacy with a plaque in the new lobby. He talked about how change is hard but necessary, how a town that does not grow dies. And then he turned, and he gestured to me, standing by the wall in my green dress with the keys around my neck, and he said, "And tonight, with all of you as witnesses, we are so grateful that Eleanor has agreed to join us in this new chapter." I had agreed to no such thing. The whole room looked at me. The mayor looked at me. The reporter's camera turned toward me. And I understood the trap completely, in an instant, the way you understand a thing your whole body has been bracing for. They had not brought me here to ask me. They had brought me here to make it impossible for me to say no. They had announced it as done, in front of everyone, so that if I refused I would look like the confused, stubborn, difficult old woman they had been describing for 2 years. They were building the file in public, in one night, in front of the entire town. If I said no, I was the obstacle. If I said nothing, I had agreed. Either way they won. I did not move. I had learned, by then, that stillness is an answer. The silence stretched. Hannah's smile began to tighten. She had expected me to fold, here of all places, with the whole town watching. She had expected me to be too proud to make a scene, too well-mannered to embarrass my family, and so to simply nod and let it happen. When I did not nod, when I just stood there and looked at her with her father's eyes looking back at me, something in her broke loose. She set down her glass. Hard. And she said, in a voice that started controlled and did not stay that way, "Mom. Do not do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone." And I did not answer, and her voice climbed. "We have given you everything. We have begged you, for 2 years, to let us help you, to take care of you, to give you a life better than this. And you throw it back in our faces every time because you would rather be a martyr than a mother." "Hannah," the mayor said, quietly. She did not hear him. "You want to know the truth," she said, and now she was loud, now the careful daughter was gone entirely and the whole room could see what I had been seeing in my kitchen for 2 years. "The truth is you have nothing. The inn loses money. You are broke. You are old. The only reason you have a roof over your head is that Preston is willing to give you one. You are going to be a partner in this because you have no other choice. So you can do this the easy way, and smile, and let us help you. Or you can do it the hard way and end up with nothing at all." And then she said it. She pointed at me, in front of 200 people, in front of the mayor and the reporter and Sully and Ruth and her own 5-year-old daughter, and she screamed it. "You can beg, Mother, or you can get nothing. Those are your choices. Beg or get nothing." The room went so silent I could hear the little lights buzzing on the porch. I want to tell you exactly how I felt in that moment, because it was not what you might think. It was not rage. The rage had burned out weeks before, in Adele's office, in the rain. It was not even heartbreak, though the heartbreak was there, under everything, the way the cold is always there under the sea. What I felt, standing in my grandfather's dining room while my daughter told me to beg, was a kind of terrible calm. The calm of a person who has already done the hard thing, and now only has to say it out loud. I walked to the platform. The crowd parted for me. I was not hurried. I climbed up beside my daughter, and I took the microphone gently from her hand, and she let me, because some part of her, the Coco in the dark part, still listened when her mother moved with that much quiet. Then I turned to the room. "You have all known me a long time," I said. "Many of you knew my Walter. Some of you knew my father, and a few of you, the oldest, remember being children when this inn was already old. So I am going to tell you the truth, all of you, because my daughter has just told you a story, and you deserve the truth instead. It is true that this inn does not make much money, I said. It never has. My grandfather did not build it to make money. He built it so that no one in Quill Harbor would ever be turned away on a cold night, and for 100 years, tonight, no one ever has been. That is not a failure. That is the whole point. I looked at Preston. He was very still now. The smile was gone. And it is true, I said, that a man came to our town with a beautiful drawing and a great deal of money, and he wanted this land, the last wild shore on this whole coast, so that he could put a glass building on it and call it a new chapter. He has been trying to take it for 2 years. He could not buy it, so he tried to take it the only other way you can take a thing from an old woman, which is to convince everyone, including her, that she has lost her mind. The murmur moved through the room again, and this time it was not confused. This time it had a direction. So here is my reply, I said, and I looked at Hannah, and I made my voice as gentle as I could, because what I was about to say was the cruelest kind thing I had ever said. You told me to beg or get nothing, I said. But there is nothing to beg for, my love. 6 weeks ago I gave the inn away. You could have heard a pin drop in the harbor. I gave it to the Quill Harbor Heritage Trust and the Coastal Conservancy, I said. The land, the building, all of it, in a trust that can never be undone, by me or by anyone. I sold the right to ever develop this shoreline for $1, forever. There will never be a resort here. There will never be condominiums. There will never be a Meridian Shores, because there is nothing left to build it on and nothing left to sell. I own a single thing now, the right to live here and run this inn until the day I die, and to hand the keys to someone who proves they understand what they are. That is all that is left. That is all anyone gets. No money. No deal. No new chapter. Just an old inn, protected for 100 more years, exactly the way my grandfather left it for me. I turned to Preston. So you see, I said, you cannot have it. You never could. And now you never will, and neither will anyone like you, ever again, because I made sure of it while you were busy photographing my deed in the dark. I turned back to the room then, to all of them, because I had one more thing to say and it was the truest thing I knew. My husband wrote me a letter once, I said, years before any of this, and he hid it where I would not find it until I needed it. He told me that the inn was not the keys, and it was not the building, and it was not even the land. He told me the inn was the way you treat a stranger who comes in cold, and everything else is just the box it comes in. And he told me that if a day ever came when keeping the box would mean losing the thing inside it, I should let the box go and keep the thing inside. So that is what I have done tonight. I let the box go. I gave the deed and the dollars and the worth that man keeps measuring to a trust that will keep this shore wild for 100 years. And I kept the thing inside. The thing inside is not for sale. The thing inside never was. You cannot put a number on it, which is exactly why a man like Preston could never see it sitting right in front of him the whole time. My voice did not shake. I had thought it would. I had lain awake imagining this night, and in the imagining my voice always broke. But standing there in my grandfather's dining room with the whole town watching and my husband's words coming out of my own mouth, I was steadier than I have ever been in my life. There is a strength that comes from saying out loud the thing you have already done. It is not the strength of the dare. It is the strength of the deed. Anyone can be brave for a sentence. I had been brave for 6 weeks in the rain, and now the sentence was just the easy part. His face. I will remember his face until I die. The handsome week-long trustworthiness fell off it all at once, and what was underneath was just a man who had bet everything on a piece of land he could not have, in front of every investor and official in the county, on a night that was supposed to be his coronation. And the room turned. I felt it happen, the way you feel the wind change before a storm. 200 people who had walked in that night uncertain, who had looked at the glossy drawing and at the screaming daughter and at the silent old woman and had not known what to believe, understood all at once which of us had been telling the truth. I saw the man from the bank who had come as Preston's guest set down his glass and reach for his coat. I saw two men in good suits, the kind of men who do not come to small-town parties unless there is money in it, step quietly toward the door, already pulling out their phones. I saw the mayor's face go from confusion to a careful, public blankness, the look of a man rapidly rearranging which side of a thing he had always been on. And I saw the faces I loved, Ruth with her hand pressed to her mouth, Sully standing very straight by the wall with his chin up and something bright in his old eyes, the retired schoolteacher who paid the off-season rate nodding slowly to herself as if a question she had carried a long time had finally been answered. No one clapped. It was not that kind of moment. It was quieter and bigger than applause. It was the sound of a town remembering what it was, and being a little ashamed of how close it had come to forgetting, and being grateful, in the way people are grateful for the person who refused to let them. And then I turned to my daughter, and I lowered the microphone, because what I said next was not for the room. It was for her, though they all heard it anyway. You asked me to choose, I said. You said beg or get nothing. But you had the choices wrong, Hannah. The choice was never mine to make. It was yours. You could have had a mother and a home and a daughter who grew up running on this shore. Or you could have had him, and his drawing, and the years you have left of needing more and never having enough. You chose. I am only telling you what you chose. I put the microphone down on the platform. I stepped off. The room did not make a sound as I walked to the front desk, where the keys had hung on their hook for 100 years, and I touched them, the brass cool under my fingers, and I felt, for the first time in 2 years, that they were mine again, and that they could never be taken, because I had already given away everything a thief could want and kept the only thing that mattered. Behind me I heard Preston say my daughter's name, once, in a voice like a man stepping off a ledge. I heard chairs scrape. I heard the reporter's camera. I did not turn around. Lily found me at the desk. She was crying, the way children cry when the grown-ups have made the air go wrong, and she put her arms around my legs and said, "Grandma, are you going away?" And I knelt down, in my green dress, on the floor my grandfather laid, and I said, "No, baby. I am not going anywhere. I am the one person here who is never going anywhere." And I held her while the gala fell apart around us, my granddaughter in my arms and the keys against both our hearts. Have you ever watched the truth land in a room full of people who thought they knew the story? Have you ever been the one holding it? Tell me. I think you might understand this night better than I can say it. I will not pretend the months after were easy. They were not. But they were honest, and there is a peace in honesty that no amount of pretending can buy. Preston's empire came down faster than I would have believed. I learned later that Meridian Shores had been built on borrowed money, layers of it, and that the whole thing depended on the in-parcel. The investors had been told it was as good as done. When word got out, that night, in front of all of them, that the land was now in a conservancy and could never be developed, the financing collapsed within the week. The bank called its loans. 2 of his other projects, propped up by the same juggling, fell with it. By spring there were lawsuits. By summer there was a word in the county paper next to Preston's name that I will not repeat but that no one wants next to their name. And it came out, the way these things do, that there had been another woman, in the city, for over a year. Maybe longer. A woman with money of her own and a father with more. Preston did not even bother to hide it once the inn was lost, because Hannah had been useful to him only as a door into the inn, and once the door was bricked shut, she was nothing to him. He filed for divorce in the autumn. He moved to another state, chasing some new shoreline, some new old woman to charm out of some new piece of land. I hope she has a daughter like me. I hope someone is waiting for him. The town did not forget the gala. That is the thing about a small place. It has a long memory and a longer tongue. People who had clapped politely at Preston's drawing now crossed the street when they saw his car. The mayor, who had nearly let himself be talked into a ribbon and a speech, told the county paper that Quill Harbor had always intended to protect its shoreline, which was a lie he was welcome to, because it meant the land was safe in the public mind now too. Ruth kept me supplied with news whether I wanted it or not, leaning over her counter with the cat winding around her ankles, telling me who had seen what and where. She told me the day the silver car was repossessed. She did not gloat. Ruth is not built that way. She just held my hand across the counter and said, "It is a sad thing, Ellie, watching a person you used to push on a swing set learn the world the hard way." Because that is what I felt, in the end, watching Hannah fall. Not triumph. There is no triumph in watching your child suffer, even a child who tried to take everything from you. I saw her once during that time, across the square, coming out of the bank with her shoulders up around her ears and Lily's hand in hers, and she saw me, and for 1 second the whole gala was in the air between us, every word of it. And then she looked away and hurried off, and I let her go, because there are seasons when the kindest thing you can do for someone is to not make them face you before they are ready. I went home and I cried, not for the inn, which was safe, but for the girl who used to make cocoa in the dark, who was somewhere inside that hunched and frightened woman, learning at last what her mother had been trying to tell her for 2 years. Some lessons cannot be given. They can only be paid for. Hannah was left with the debts he had put in both their names, and a child, and a town that had watched her scream at her mother to beg. She lost the house in town. She lost most of what she had. She did not call me. Pride, I think, and shame, which are often the same thing wearing different coats. I did not call her either, and I want to be honest with you about why, because I think some of you are waiting for me to say that I forgave her right away and ran to her with open arms, and the truth is I did not. I had given away $3 million and the certainty of my last years to protect us both from her husband. I had earned the right to my own quiet for a while. I tended the inn. I served breakfast. I sat on the porch in the evenings and read Walter's letter when I missed him. I let the year turn. Has anyone ever told you that you forgave too quickly, or not quickly enough? There is no clock on it. I learned that. Forgiveness comes when it comes, and it is not a gift you owe to the person who hurt you. It is a door you open when you are ready, for your own sake more than theirs. It was almost a year later, on a gray morning in early winter, that someone knocked on the front door of the inn before dawn. We had 2 guests that week, an off-season couple, and I thought one of them had locked themselves out, so I came down in my robe with the keys around my neck and opened the door. It was Hannah. She was thinner. She had Lily by the hand, half asleep, in a coat that was too small for her. There was a single suitcase behind them on the porch, in the cold, and Hannah's face when she looked at me was not the closed door it had been at the lunch with the white tablecloth. It was open. It was wrecked. It was the face of my daughter. "Mom," she said. And then she could not say anything else. She just stood there in the cold with my granddaughter's hand in hers and tears running down her face, and the word she finally got out was not an excuse and not an argument. It was just, "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I do not have anywhere else to go." I want to tell you what a mother feels in that moment, because it is 2 things at once and they do not cancel out. One is the old wound, screaming, "Remember the gala, remember beg or get nothing, remember the deed in the dark, do not let her in, she will only do it again." And the other is older than the wound, older than the gala, older than Preston, as old as the first time I held her in the hospital and counted her fingers. And the older thing won, because it always wins, because that is what it means to be a mother. It is not that the wound stops hurting. It is that the love is simply older and stronger and it gets to the door first. I did not say it is all right, because it was not all right. I did not say I forgive you, because forgiveness that fast is just a way of skipping the hard part. I said the only true thing I had. I said, "Coming out of the cold. No one is ever turned away here. You know that. Your grandfather built it that way." And I stepped back, and I held the door, and my daughter and my granddaughter came in out of the cold, and I put the kettle on, the same kettle that had been whistling the morning Walter died, and we sat in the kitchen at the table he built, and we did not fix anything that morning, because some things take years and not mornings. But we started. The first months were not tender. I want to be honest about that, because the stories that skip the hard middle do a disservice to anyone living in one. There were nights Hannah cried so hard I thought she would make herself sick, and nights she was angry, at Preston, at herself, and once, terribly, at me, shouting that if I had just signed the papers none of it would have happened, that I had cost her everything with my stubbornness. I let her shout. I had learned the power of stillness by then. When she was done, spent, sitting on the kitchen floor with her back against the cupboard, I sat down on the floor beside her, an old woman folding herself down to the linoleum, and I said, "You are right that my no cost you something. But his yes would have cost you everything, and you would not have even known it was gone. I did not save the inn from you, Hannah. I saved you from a life of needing more and more and never once being full." She did not answer. But she put her head on my shoulder, there on the kitchen floor, and that was answer enough. Sully was the one who gave her the way back in, though I do not think he planned it. One morning he simply handed her a list, the way he used to hand her chores when she was 12, and said, "The gutters on the north side are full and I cannot climb any more, my knees are done, so it is you or it is nobody." And Hannah looked at the list, and at the old man who had taught her to drive a nail, and something in her face came home. She climbed up and cleaned the gutters. She came down filthy and scraped and, for the first time in a year, lighter. Work is its own kind of forgiveness. It does not say the words. It just gives your hands something honest to do until the rest of you catches up. Hannah lives at the inn now. She has for almost 4 years. She did not get her old life back, and she did not ask for it. She came in as help, the way she had been as a girl after her father died, and that is what she has stayed, and I think it has healed her more than any inheritance ever could. She strips the beds. She does the books, honestly this time every dollar accounted for, because she knows I check and she wants me to check. She has gotten up before dawn more mornings than I can count to serve breakfast to strangers, and somewhere in there, in the doing of it, the daughter I lost came back. Not all at once. Not the same. But back. She has never once asked me to undo the trust. That is how I know. A woman who wanted the inn would have spent these 4 years working an angle, looking for a crack in Adele's papers, charming me toward a signature. Hannah has done the opposite. She tells me, sometimes, when the Conservancy people come for their yearly visit, that she is glad it can never be sold. She said to me once, late, after a long day, "Mom, you protected it from me, did you not?" Not just from him. From me. And I told her the truth. I said, I protected it from who you were becoming. I always believed in who you actually were. Lily is 9 now. She runs on the shore the way I did, the way her great-great-grandfather hoped someone always would. She knows every key on the ring by what it opens. She knows the story of the year the harbor froze, the right way, my way. On New Year's Eve she stands beside me at the desk when we give the first key to the oldest returning guest, the way my family always has, and last year, for the first time, I let her hand over the key herself, and the old man who took it had tears in his eyes, and so did I. There was an evening last autumn I keep folded up in my chest the way I keep Walter's letter. The Conservancy people had come for their yearly visit, 2 earnest young women with clipboards who walk the grounds and check that the promise is being kept, and after they left, Hannah and I sat on the porch with the light Sully still strings every season, and Lily was chasing the last of the fireflies down by the water. Hannah was quiet a long time. Then she said, "Mom, I used to lie awake doing the math on this place. What it was worth. What we could turn it into. I had it down to the dollar. And now I lie awake and I cannot remember why the number ever felt like it mattered. I do not know who that woman was." I looked at my daughter in the porch light, older now, lined now, real now, and I said, I know who she was. She was a woman who was hungry for something a number can never fill, and a man told her the number would fill it, and she believed him because believing him was easier than looking at the hunger. And Hannah said, "How did you know it would not fill it?" And I said, "Because your grandfather built a hole in out of refusing to believe that, and I have been sleeping under his roof for 60 years. We did not say anything for a while after that. We did not need to. Down on the shore Lily caught a firefly and let it go, caught one and let it go, over and over, learning without knowing she was learning that you can hold a beautiful thing for a moment and that holding it forever would only kill it. The lights buzzed on the porch. The harbor breathed in the dark the way it has for 100 years and will for 100 more, because of a rainy afternoon in a lawyer's office that no one applauded. Preston, I am told, is on his third state and his second collapsed project. I do not follow it closely. Adele sends me a clipping now and then, with a single dry line in the margin. Men like him do not change. They just run out of shorelines, and run out of women, and one day they run out of road, and there is no one waiting for them, because they spent their whole lives needing more and never once learning how to need less. I do not wish him harm. Life is doing that without my help. And me. I am 64 now. The keys still hang around my neck. They are just brass and old iron, and they are also 100 years of not turning anyone away, and they are also the morning my daughter came in out of the cold, and they are also Walter, somewhere, looking for me the way he promised. I will wear them until I die. And when I die, Hannah will have her 10 years to prove what kind of innkeeper she has become, and I have very little doubt now what the answer will be. After that, Lily. And after Lily, someone neither of us has met yet, 100 years from now, on some cold night, opening the door to a stranger because a woman they never knew made sure they always could. People called me a stubborn old woman. My own daughter called me a martyr clinging to rotten wood. Maybe I was stubborn. But I was not clinging to the past. I gave the past away, on purpose, to a trust, so it could become the future. What I held on to was not the building and not even the keys. It was the thing inside the box, the way Walter told me. And the thing inside, it turns out, was never the inn at all. It was the kind of person you are when someone tells you to beg, and you discover that you have already made it so that no one ever has to. That is the reply she did not expect. Not the words. The years of quiet work behind the words. Anyone can refuse in a moment. The strength is in what you did before the moment came, in the rain, with cold hands, when no one was watching and there was no applause, only the certainty that you were doing the right thing and that it might cost you your child. It cost me my child for a year. And then it gave her back, better than she was. Life collects its debts, from all of us. It collected from Preston with ruin, and from Hannah with a hard road home, and from me with a year of silence and a great deal of money I will never see. But what it paid me back was worth more than any of it. It paid me back with peace, and with a granddaughter running on the shore, and with the quiet knowledge that when the worst night of my life came, I stood up in my grandfather's house and I did not beg, and I did not get nothing. I got everything that ever mattered. I just had to give away everything that did not, to keep it. If this story reached you tonight, wherever you are, and if you have ever been told that loving someone means letting them take whatever they want from you, I want you to hear me. Love sets a table for anyone who comes in from the cold. But love also knows how to lock the one door that must stay locked. Those are not opposites. They are the same key. And the day you understand that is the day no one can ever tell you to beg again. Thank you for staying with me to the end. If this story touched something in you, share it with a woman who needs to hear it tonight. Sometimes one story is the thing that finally helps someone open her eyes. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to protect what you love from someone you love? I will be reading. I read every one. God bless you, and until next time. Stories like this remind us that starting over is terrifying, but it is always possible. If you or someone you love is facing a total reset right now, whether from a divorce, a loss, or a financial disaster, you need a plan. Scan the QR code on your screen or click the link below to get the Phoenix Blueprint for just $17. It gives you the exact steps you need to take in the first 48 hours, and a 90-day plan to get your independence back. Thank you for watching.